As always, data has always been the new oil, the new tofu, you name it. It's a new everything, man. I think vector DB came into the market, even though we were using vector DBs to a massive extent even before Gen AI, but still we are worshipping vector DBs today. And who better than Akash, who has dabbled around with different technologies, dabbled around different software engineering practices, to give you that insights about what is actual data tooling ecosystem today. And also, guess what, there's a lot of things that's changing over a course of time, right? In terms of the people who are coming in terms of the tools, the maturity in which it's giving the engineers, right? Like it's giving that accessibility to the engineers to solve bigger problem statements. So let's demystify it, let's understand much beyond it. So Akash, let's start with your introduction, so that would be great.
All right, cool. Hey everyone, good evening. It's 11:05 p.m. in the night. So if you're listening to this, thank you. If you listen to this later, thank you. Not nevertheless, this is Akash Sharma. I have been predominantly an architect, and I still like to think of myself as that. I've been designing software systems. So yeah, to add to what you're saying, Vishwas, right? I think the data ecosystem is has been evolving. The data engineering ecosystem has been evolving for quite some time. We started with traditional databases, warehouses, mesh technologies, movement to cloud, and all of that. And a lot of in between, somewhere we picked up the ability to work with unstructured data. And then CV was pretty cool in for the past few years before ChatGPT, and a lot of techniques in CV where there computer vision was really doing out, and traditional ML and deep learning were kind of the thing. But then with ChatGPT coming around and generative AI and LLMs being at least riding the trend for the past 2.5 years, you do see a significant shift in the ability to work with unstructured data. So the amount of unstructured data that's consumed now, I'm assuming, I don't have stats to quote, would be higher because you have better tools to process them. So traditional problems like sentiment analysis, going through your comments, feed history, they are a thing of the past. They can be done pretty easily with the newer tools. So the surrounding space, right, the whole data management ecosystem, the data pipeline ecosystem, the tooling ecosystem is also evolving. You see more cloud database providers like Snowflake and tons of other newer players in the market supporting vectors as a core data structure itself.
Hmm.
So vectors were more like, you would have a vector created, and yes, you rightly pointed out that vectors to pehle bhi use karte the. It's nothing new, but having a database product dedicated to vectors, like previously you had two kinds of databases, like structured, unstructured. This was the thing. And then you ended up with a bunch of more tooling around specialized ones like time series database ho gaya, log databases ho gaya. So there were a bunch of database products from a type of data perspective. So vector DBs are a, in that sense, new category in that, and there's a lot of players in the market. VV8 hai. But by far and large, the trend that's coming out is it's becoming a core offering in most databases. So be it PG Vector Store, or even Reddish has some sort of a plugin or a library which you can put and use it as a vector store. So all of these different providers are getting into that. So that's one important trend popping up. Second is, as you churn more data, as you churn more unstructured data, the need to curate data from different sources is also growing. So people are now more hungry about social indexes, data around the chatter, news articles, and things like Twitter feeds. All of these, and even Instagram comments, they are being farmed much more for digital marketing use cases, for content use cases, or even for traditional insights. So these two trends are emerging, and the tooling around them is obviously increasing. Every player is trying it out, so it's not that there's a one prominent player coming out. There is, yeah. Maybe I'll take a pause with that and pass it back to you.
Yeah, I think to a massive extent, right? Today when I even see like the Gen AI trend, Back then, data used to define how accurate the model is, but today data defines a new technological wave, right? I was just seeing, and data mesh as one of those trends that was coming back then in like 2019ish, 2020ish. Data lakes were fine. Now let's get inside the data mesh. The sources are everywhere. But today, if you consider data is getting generated from like hundreds and different of places. And guess what? Data is now getting synthesized. So let's talk about the tooling ecosystem that is there behind the data engineering aspects. Spark, Hadoop, HDFS, whatever it is. Like all the technologies defined big data today. Like what was there back then, it still is getting MapReduce. Like you name it, Zookeeper. All these things have defined what big data is. But let's talk about big data engineering ecosystem and the tools that are running this technology.
So let's start the conversation with data mesh bits, right? I think you touched upon data mesh, and mesh has been a very interesting evolution into the whole ecosystem. We had traditional data management techniques which were around structured, then we had warehouses, then we had lakes, and mesh goes more towards decentralization of data. So you think of more data as a product, and you could have different verticals looking at data. You would probably want to associate data with different domains so that your data is looked in the sense of domain brandedness. So you have a store for, in similar from a warehouse concept, at least that's how I think of it, but you map the domain onto the data and then you start to think of it as a product, and then you build some sort of a self-serve tools or data platforms to stick it on top of it. Now, there's different kinds and categories of tools. When we get into tools, you would have tools which will help you bring the data from point A to point B. So you have great players like Fivetran in the market, which are essentially a data movement tool. So you could use it to power your real time analytics. You could use it to power insights. You can just accelerate anything with that. So Fivetran is a good place for you doing a lot of data movement, and that's just source to destination. This is not processing, this is not storage. The second category of tools would be obviously storage, because once you have picked the data from a source, you need to sync it. And then there's a lot of tools in that ecosystem, Snowflake being a very very prominent player, but you have a lot of different database products coming out as well. You have Cockroach DB, you have traditional PostgreSQL, MySQL is still doing good. What the MongoDB parts are doing good, and then cloud proprietaries database products. DynamoDB is doing good. Uh, MS SQL, I haven't seen a lot of movement in that space, so cannot comment on that. BigQuery is doing great in specific use cases like marketing. So those storage use cases are there. And a trend that's coming around this is there are organizations that are strong with data storage and as a data platform like Snowflake. They are venturing more into compute and those capabilities. But then the third tier of tooling, which is like the processing companies, the Databricks of the world, which is literally, or in most likelihood, the market leader. Again, I'm not quoting any research, but I think they are doing probably the best and the biggest in this space, generically speaking, backed by Spark. So Databricks has a very, very rich ecosystem when it comes to processing data, be it at rest, be it in motion, all of that capabilities are there. And they are now venturing deep into the storage space as well. So Apache has a very interesting project called Apache Iceberg. I'm not sure if you have stumbled upon it. And Iceberg is kind of becoming a really high performance data format, specifically geared around analytics use cases and things like that. So it's designed for, think of it as SQL layer on top of big data, not like Hadoop or anything, but you can leverage most of the engines on top of it. Like you can bring your Flink, Presto, Hive works on top of it, Spark obviously works on top of it. So it's very expressive. So Iceberg is something which Databricks is picking. So the trend around these toolings is there's a processing ecosystem coming, which is very very stable. The extract and transform kind of those categories. So you have, as I said, Fivetran is one. You have Azure Databricks, which is glowed. You have a lot of AWS services that do this, and then there are supporting services like catalogs. Glue is there, AWS Glue is there. You can even have your custom catalogs like feature stores and all that if you are deep in the ML space. And then you have unstructured data storage like MongoDB and things like that. So those players around storage are existing, and then you have the movement folks. Outside of these two, then you end up on the processing side, and I think right now the best trend riding out is Databricks. They're growing really really fast. Snowflake also has very interesting capabilities. They have a capability called Snowpark, and a whole bunch of services around it. Cortex. Some of them are AI powered, some of them are Gen AI powered, but essentially they are getting more in the processing part. So these are some of the key players around it. More tools would exist, I think. There's a great room for metadata management, so there's tooling around for that. There's a lot of ecosystem available for governance, that there's tooling around for that. There's discovery tools coming around. So I think Azure has a tool, I'm forgetting the name, which is good, and which
Synapse, Azure Fabric.
Fabric is a very very interesting blend. I was going to lean into Fabric after this, but there's a tool which I'm forgetting on Azure. It basically is a data catalog, but the whole idea is do discoverability on your data, keep your metadata up to date, understand broken relationships, build
Purview.
a catalog. Sorry, what was the name you said?
Purview.
Yeah, Purview. Yeah, so Purview has been there, and then there are a lot of open source projects as well in that space. So those supporting tooling is also evolving. Again,
Hmm.
how much of that is evolving for Gen AI is still to be seen. I have not seen a lot of tools from a Gen AI perspective, even though most will have some sort of hook onto Gen AI. They'll say that, oh, enabling Gen AI and all whatnot. But within Gen AI space, I think the tooling ecosystem is largely focused on building apps using Gen AI and not really storing for Gen AI. And I think part of that could be because of the reason that you don't end up training at all in Gen AI. I mean, fine tuning is what, I don't know, maybe 5% of the people do fine tuning. Most of the workflows are powered by RAG architecture. So yeah, that's my take on it. And Fabric is a very very interesting find. I think tries to bring forth everything, and Microsoft has all the right pieces to it. They have Synapse, they have storage capabilities, they have Power BI visualization, they have discoverability. So they have baked everything under the sun that you need for data, and then they have given you Fabric. Fabric is a pretty neat tool, quite a rich, feature rich data platform. I am personally not aware of any more platforms that do similar things. So if you are aware, please put in the comments. Yeah.
Or I think
Short take on tools.
very long take on tools. By the way, it's almost like 7 minutes.
Okay.
So so yeah, I think somewhere down the line, everybody is expecting an IDP where we still doesn't have a proper IDP in the DevOps world today. It's There are even use cases where I feel like some tools can't scale on production because everybody on production, let's say a developer from every walks of the department, right? Like let's say data platform folks have their own set of use cases that they want to drive. Typical developers require a lot of knowledge based on the latency of an API, or else how is the real-time user monitoring, the RUM aspect taken care. So many things are happening, but there's no unified tool. There is no unified technology that solves all the problem. There's no one tool that can solve it all. It's a combination of all. But let's talk about like what are these tools missing out today, because so many open source tools, so many frameworks. What is it happening?
I don't think there will ever be a tool. Again, don't think ever is a very strong word, but I don't think there should be a tool that does it all. It's too far and too lofty of a goal. I think Fabric is probably the closest. But if you think about it, right, you have ingestion, you have storage, you have processing, you have analysis, you reporting, governance, security, orchestration, workflows, pipelines, access management, security. So many different cross-cutting concerns that it's very difficult for a single tool to solve for all. And if you end up with a single tool, another challenge that enterprises would feel or at least think about is that once you start with the tool, you literally get vendor locked in. I mean, if you want to, or you will not be able to move out of that ecosystem ever. So it's actually a good thing that you don't have a single platform that does it all. If there was one, I personally would never suggest using it, because vendor lock-ins are really bad. You might get, if you start using it 5 years down the line, you see a trend changing and you see a new you know adoption. I don't know, you have a new data, quote unquote, whatever comes afterwards in later, and that organization is just not taking it up at the speed at which it should, so you are stuck with them. So I don't think there should be a IDP kind of a tool in the data ecosystem. Having said that, I think competition also helps drive a lot of innovation. So when you have different lake providers, when you have different warehouse providers, when you have different real-time processing technologies, you have different cloud native stuff, that all helps to build and upgrade the tooling ecosystem and keeps challenging each other. So that essentially is a good thing. If you go back and look at the simple conversation of catalog, a catalog problem has always existed, but as as a successful implementation of catalog, they are very rare, because the dimensions and the landscape within data changes very fast. So that, I think, cataloging would be a gap in my view. I also think that's a very strong opportunity, because if you can build a data cataloging tool which is very much semantically aware, has domain understanding, is well powered by Gen AI and whatnot, that cataloging tool could really be helpful to a lot of people out there. It could have a bunch of existing understanding of the traditional schemas around SAPs and Salesforce, but it could also support your custom schema and tailoring and all of that, and you can work with the Gen AI piece to build that understanding. So cataloging tools are a good gap. I also think there's very limited viability for large scale data problems. Like, there aren't a lot of cheap solutions out. If you want to get to use Hadoop or Hive or whatever you want to do, which I don't think anybody would uses. At least recently, I haven't encountered instances of using Hadoop in enterprises. Maybe I need to look out more. But what will happen is, if you have those kind of large data needs or problems, the number of options are very, very limited. So I think the demand for storing large volume of data would increase, and I think projects that are readily and easily accessible for people to start and play around with, that is not existing, at least in my limited knowledge. So maybe that's an area of looking around. Third would be, we could probably do much better with unstructured data. I think the tooling that we have right now is good. It has served good use cases. But if I had a database product where I just connect some source, unstructured data is automatically getting pulled in, and vector representations are constantly getting churned at a very low cost, I would be interested in that. So cost drivers for scale would also always be a challenge. I wouldn't call that as a gap, but that's always a requirement. So yeah, those few things I would say that we could try and focus on in the future.
True, true, true. I think what are your last thoughts on like the Gen AI wave that is actually driving it? Because back then when I used to just query something, I was expecting an answer. Today I expect a behavior, right? I'm like I think you might have seen it in the Startup Hustle meetup group. Like I told it, behave like Jenny Radcliffe, a social engineer who does social hacking into big banks and things like that. It really did most amount of the work. I'm talking about a generic chat GPT that is able to deliver such kind of an excellence. So, what
So
are your thoughts on it?
So I don't believe in doomsday scenarios, but I do think what you're seeing right now would be childed and schooled by what you will see 2 years later. I think it's just a beginning. Uh, there's a very interesting video from Ian Godfellow and Jeffrey Hilton, bunch of those forefathers, and I think the trend is very bullish. Whether we end up with Gen AI or and transformer based architectures or not is to be seen. There are always newer avenues to explore, newer ways of calculating things. And I was reading a bunch of papers around that there's something better that has come up, which is better than the current way of back propagation. So I'm not, again, not able to recall the name. But the point is, the trend is bullish and it will continue because everybody is in that race. Uh, Till 2020, 2023 was still a year of hype. 2024 is more like plateauing. So a lot more investments are expected to flow in from all across the domains into this whole ecosystem. And when money flows in, innovation automatically thrives. And when maybe 2024 later part or 2025 is when you will start to see things getting more mainstream. Right now, most organizations are still chasing, trying to build a strategy around Gen AI, how to respond to Gen AI, and where can it help, how can it help, etc. There are maybe a couple of use cases floating around with them, but the penetration would be much higher going forward. And as the penetration increases, the quality of models will also increase. These big shots are already in a race, so that's there. And yeah, I think that will continue to happen. The race will continue to happen. The multimodality is an interesting bit. I think as you go more better with videos and images, right now they can do something, but it's not truly usable. It's very it's just not good. I mean, I've tried using it for simple tasks like generating YouTube thumbnails, and it really sucks. So once we get a good handle on multimodality, I think things would go much more bigger and better. And also the things that we see right now, things like context window and memory limits and all of that, they would go away. uh, I think it's just a matter of couple of years. So hugely bullish on the trend, uh, and hugely bullish on the fact that data would still continue to power most of those. So anything that bridges the line or intersects it directly would be a good business as well to get into.
True, true. I think the persona is changing. I think the
Yeah.
market trend that is always talking about, hey man, you know what? We had petabyte scale of data and we thought we were the biggest to have it. And today, petabyte is nothing. Like it's achievable at any cost. We thought zettabytes were amazing. We thought, okay, fine, today zettabytes is also like very small, and we are still yet to figure out how big the technology can really evolve, how data ecosystem is going to massively impact the technologies. So let's talk about it. I think probably I would love to do a whole new bunch of series just inviting Akash onto the show, because a short span of time explaining all these things in a very detailed fashion, I think it requires a lot of experience. Thank you so much, Akash, for being on the show. Means a lot.
Thank you so much. So for your reference, we do on the internet about what, zero point 0.4, zero point 0.5 zettabytes every single day. I'm pretty sure we'll be doing 1 zettabyte maybe 2 years down the line or faster. So
That's
yeah,
true.
zettabytes are no longer cool. At least when I started my career, we never. I've never used the word beyond terabyte. Like terabyte was the border at which most things would end. I have the maximum I had worked in my early stages of career were like 4 5 terabytes of data, but of recently those numbers are just skyrocketing. Terabytes are pretty common. uh, Petabytes are becoming common for enterprises. Beyond that is more, I don't think it's a one organization game to get into zettabytes. Maybe Amazon has it, or maybe the top tech has it. But yeah, good to talk, and would love to continue this conversations. Interesting, insightful. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Akash. Thank you so much, folks, for being on the show. Means a
Sure.
lot. If you are seeing after this live stream, thank you so much for that. And this is Vishwas Nayan signing off from the show. Meet you with a new guest, a new podcast, probably a new topic apart from the data and all these things. Of course, these days I'm starting with a lot of VC startup and everything as a new trend. But let me just work on it and see you soon.